So as you can see on your screens now, we have not just one presenter for this, but at least 3. So I can see 3, but I think we may have 4 presenters, and they're all from Thames Tideway. So we're going to hear a little bit about Thames Tideway itself, and then they're going to tell us about diversity and inclusion and what they're all doing about it. So we have Hetal Gandhi, who is the chair of the Race Equality Group. We have Mary McInnes, who is the chair of Ability Action Group. We have Arlette Cole, who is chair of the Gender Equality Group, and we have Adam Smith, who is chair of the LGBTQ+ group. So please give them a warm welcome. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name's Hetal Gandhi, and me and my colleagues are going to be talking about diversity inclusion at Tideway. But let me just give you a bit of a broad overview about Tideway itself. We are a construction company building a super sewer underneath the River Thames. The tunnel itself is 25 kilometres long, starting in Acton, West London, and going all the way to Beckton in the east. And once complete, the sewer itself will intercept, store, and ultimately transfer sewage waste away from the River Thames. Along with this massive infrastructure project, what we are also trying to do is leave behind a lasting legacy in these 5 areas. Oh, sorry, I forgot to ask about the slides. Oh, can we go to the next slide, please? Sorry. Oh, the next one. Yep, this is the 5 areas in which we're trying to create a lasting legacy. Environment, health, safety and well-being, economy, people and place. As part of the people legacy aims, we want to leave behind a skills and employment legacy. So an ambition to deliver best practice across everything that we do, drive up inclusivity within the construction industry, because we believe at Tideway that people are going to be at their most productive when they feel included and valued. So that's why diversity and inclusion is key to our business strategy. Can I get the next slide, please? Perfect. When the company was formed in 2015, Tideway's inclusivity program Encompass was created, and that kind of brought together the various groups under one umbrella. They were gender parity, which aims to have a 50% female workforce by the end of the project, actionability, which focuses on making the workplace accessible to all people, cultures, which works to make our sites inclusive to people of different faiths and backgrounds, and LGBTQ+, which focuses on creating an inclusive workplace. In 2017, Marcia Williams, our head of diverse development and inclusion, reviewed and just restructured how the Encompass program was set up just to make it more effective. So Tideway and our main works contractors have their own individual groups, but they still combine forces to share knowledge and resources. And our carers support network joined Encompass in 2019. So now the Encompass network is split into 5 subgroups, which meet roughly every month to discuss future actions, activities, events, but it's overridden by a steering group that meets quarterly to review what's been happening, share knowledge across the different groups, as well as to discuss future plans. And can I get the next slide, please? One of the most important things that we found is executive buy-in and executive sponsors. So at Tideway, each of the 5 sub-networks has its own executive sponsor. They all attend the group meetings and then they report back into the board meetings in terms of the activities that are going on. In terms of important pieces of advice, this would be one of the key things because they're able to provide their knowledge and experience to help push the group's agenda up into the business and in terms of priorities, but they can also lead by example as well. Next slide, please. And the next thing is also the data, which I'm sure has been discussed quite a lot during this conference and its importance, because from a D&I point of view, it can actually give you an accurate reflection of the makeup of your workforce. And it also can help you identify areas for concern that you just may not have been aware of before, depending on how you can, how you analyze the data. At Tideway, we collect data on ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, and disability. Sorry. One of the key things, though, to make sure that people do fill in that data so you can get that accurate picture is to make sure that you have a clear comms plan. So it says why you're collecting the data, what you're going to do with the data as well, and being transparent, and that way you can build trust with the workforce. As there are some people who've had negative experiences around disclosing data, or people who just don't want to provide the data for any kind of combination of reasons. At Tideway, we use the data to influence policy and procedures, and it also feeds into our overall commitment to creating an inclusive culture and organisation. And in our annual report, we do put in the gender pay gap, and we also currently have a proposal in progress, to voluntarily publish our ethnicity pay gap. Next slide, please. This slide just shows you some of the events that have been organised through the Encompass network. One of the most popular is Curry and Chat, which was basically you just, we have excellent canteen, cafe staff. They make brilliant food, and they made curry, and then you come and then you have a chat with your colleagues at lunchtime. And we've done this in different iterations, playing on that kind of theme, and they're normally done in kind of conjunction with mental health awareness days, as mental health and well-being is very important at Tideway. And we've got various things in place around that. So we've got mental health first aiders. When we went into lockdown, the health safety wellbeing team created tribes of different groups so that you had people to talk to that were going through similar experiences. So for example, if you're a parent with a teenager, if you're a parent with young kids, if you are a carer, and that kind of thing. Some of the other events were Step Up and Stand Out. This was an event that was hosted by the LGBTQ network. This was a panel discussion on the importance of visible allies and role models within the construction industry. And we've had similar events for International Women's Day, and also around raising awareness in regards to people who live with a disability. And I will now pass you over to Adam Smith, who is the chair of our LGBTQ+ network.
Thanks, Hettel. I hope you can see and hear me okay. I was having some tech issues a minute ago. So yeah, my name's Adam Smith. I'm creative lead at Tideway, so I do a lot of the graphic design work that you see on the project. But I'm also chair of the LGBTQ+ Encompass network. So this slide here just shows us back in 2019 at Pride in London on a lovely sunny day. 50 of us from the project were there. And yeah, so I'm just going to talk about how the LGBT network was formed. It wasn't originally part of the original Compass group to begin with. Back in 2014, when the company was formed, I think LGBT issues weren't perhaps on the radar for businesses as much as they are now. So I think that shows you how far we've come. And we had a trans person on the project at the time who was transitioning, and she pushed to get the LGBTQ+ network set up, and it was quickly agreed, and it became part of Encompass fairly soon after the company was formed in 2014. She's since moved on from the project, and I worked closely with her while she was there, so I'm now chair of the network. And as a network, we act as a support network for LGBT staff, but also to raise awareness of LGBT equality in the construction and engineering industries. Can I have the next slide, please? So one of the first things we did as a network was to have a look at our policies and review them, and we kind of continue to do this on an annual basis. We work quite closely with the charity Stonewall and use their guidance and their best practice examples to sort of look at our policies and how we can better make sure that they're inclusive as possible for all staff. So, for example, the parental leave policy was quite an important one because we needed to make sure it was inclusive to same-sex couples, but also single parents, and included terminology about surrogacy and adoption. I think it's important to say that nothing drastically changed in the policy. It was just mainly rewording it so that it applied to all members of staff. The same applied with compassionate leave and our dress code policies, just making sure that, particularly on the dress code policies, there was nothing that was gendered in there and anyone could. We have a smart casual dress policy at work, and on site is different, but just to make sure that everyone feels able to wear what they need to wear at work. And our bullying and harassment policy, we added a zero tolerance statement, on all forms of discrimination. And it also includes definitions and examples of what constitutes homophobic, biphobic and transphobic bullying. But there's also similar examples in there around sexism, racism and disableism. And then finally, we also introduced the transitioning at work policy, which details policy and procedure when a member of staff is transitioning. It also has a series of guidance there that provides staff and line managers with guidance for their colleagues that may be transitioning in the workforce. And this was led by the person who sort of set up the LGBT network originally that I mentioned earlier. Have the next slide, please. And allies is a sort of an important way to include everybody in what we do, but it's an important way for non-LGBTQ staff to show their support to LGBT colleagues. Being a visible ally can help somebody truly feel comfortable at work and not hide their true self. And some statistics for you. These were taken from Stonewall's 2018 research called LGBT in Britain, that more than a third, 35% of LGBT people have hidden their sexuality or gender identity at work. 38% of people, so nearly two quarters, of bi people are not out to anybody at work, and 1 in 5 LGBT people have experienced discrimination in the workplace. So being an ally is really important. And we set up these 4 principles here, you can see on this card, of how to be an ally and what you would agree to be an ally. So number 1 was to be visible. Number 2 was to listen to others. Number 3 was check for inappropriate banter. So just call out anything you hear that is homophobic, racist, sexist, disableist, and to be supportive of all staff. We believe everyone has the right to come into work in an environment where they feel safe, valued, and accepted, regardless of our differences. So if you do sign up to this, you'll receive a little pin badge and a sticker that you can wear on your hard hat if you work on site. And we also encourage everyone to be an ally for all different people. So to support a Black colleague, to help fight better provisions for disabled staff, to champion women, and also to support LGBT staff to bring the whole self to work. And at the bottom right there, you can see we also encourage staff to use pronouns in their email signatures and social media bios. This is just a quick and simple way to show support to trans and non-binary staff. Showing your pronouns shows everyone that you won't assume their gender and help normalise conversations around gender and gender identities. So my pronouns are he and him, but somebody who is non-binary may use they and them. It's just a simple way to sort of normalise that conversation. Could I have the next slide, please? I'm just going to talk about a few events that we held, and these seem like a lifetime ago, but they were actually pretty much less than a year ago, some of them just before the pandemic hit. So the first event on the left was an event we did back in November 2019 for Trans Awareness Week. We did a lunchtime event where the trans youth charity Mermaids came in and spoke to us about their work. And we showed an episode of an ITV series called Butterfly, which is a TV series that focuses on a family who has a child who realizes they're trans and they're transitioning. We also fundraised some money for them as well. And then in the evening, Jake and Hannah Graff, who are a trans couple, quite well known in the media, and they're also patrons of the Mermaids charity, came in and spoke about their experiences about transitioning and trans equality and how they're sort of now parents of a child and how they've achieved all that. It was quite an amazing event, really. The next event in the middle was LGBT History Month, which we did last February. And we had a colleague from our supply chain come in and spoke of his experiences growing up as a gay man in the 80s. He talked about the rejection he had from his family, but also finding new family in the drag and the ballroom scene that was popular in London in the 80s, and also how Section 28 affected his time at school. It was quite an emotional and informative event, and important to understand LGBT history and how it still shapes our society today. And finally, on the right, we did Student Pride at the end of February. It was literally 2 weeks before we all started working from home, I think. And we had a stall at Student Pride and their recruitment fair. And we talked to students about potential work experience and apprenticeships and graduate placements that we have on the project, but also exist through our contractors and through the wider industry. Yeah, next slide, please. So then, yeah, obviously March happened, the pandemic hit, and although construction continued, a lot of us found ourselves working from home and still are to this day. Pride in London was cancelled, but we decided the event still needed to be marked in a way. It's an important event in the LGBT calendar. So we created 2 videos featuring staff from across the project. One was for Ida Hobbit Day, which is the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia, which happens on May the 17th every year. And this was just a simple statement of support to show a commitment to stamp out all forms of discrimination within the company and the wider industry. And this was published on our social media. And then we made a video for Pride, which looked back on the previous 3 years in the parade and talked about our favourite moments. We shared these internally, but also on social media. And for the Pride video, we shared a playlist of TV shows, movies, music that staff could celebrate Pride at home with, whilst still learning about LGBT topics from a selection of shows. Next slide, please. So yeah, we didn't let the global pandemic stop us. And for the past year, we still managed to arrange some events. The first one we did was a fundraising event as part of a wider fundraising initiative we had at Tideway. And the LGBT network came up with this initiative called You're on Mute. And the premise was that if you are caught on mute on a Teams or Zoom call during the month of September, which we all have done at some point, you'd be posted to our fundraising page to make a donation to the Albert Kennedy Trust and Diversity Role Models. For those of you who don't know, Albert Kennedy Trust is a homelessness charity that works with LGBT young people. I think 1 in 4 homeless people under 25 identify as LGBT. And Diversity Role Models help to implement inclusive education in schools. With matched funding, we raised over £600 and had a huge level of engagement from staff and a senior exec team as well. At the bottom, we just had a little online party because we were shortlisted, lucky enough to be shortlisted in the British LGBT Awards last year in the Inclusive Employer category. And that's us sort of celebrating the event, watching the event live online with our CEO there as well. And then in November, we held another event for Trans Awareness Week with YouTubers Jamie and Shabba. And this event was in partnership with the Gender Encompass Group, and they spoke about their experiences. Jamie, with the help of his girlfriend Shabba, has documented his transition on the YouTube page. It's quite interesting to watch. They also spoke about the Gender Recognition Act and their response to J.K. Rowling's essays against trans equality. In some ways, the event hosting online was much better than doing it in the office. We get so many more people come along and join in, and it was a great thing to do. However, we all miss face-to-face events, hopefully soon. And next slide, please. And finally, I just wanted to show you some pictures from Pride, and it's the jewel in the crown every year. We've attended Pride in London for the past 3 years, and with 50 members of Tideway staff taking part each year. It's an important event. It's a time for celebration, but it's still an important moment to process and fight for true equality, especially for trans and gender non-conforming people. The fight is far from over. And let's hope we get to do it again soon. And can I have the next slide, please? So just to sum up some key takeaways, work together to promote intersectionality. So work with other networks, your race networks, your gender networks, disability networks. We all have multiple identities and we need to work together to promote that. Review your policies, make sure they're inclusive to all of your staff. As Hetal said earlier, have an executive sponsor to promote your work at board level. Our exec sponsor is the Director of Health, Safety and Wellbeing, and he's been instrumental in giving us a voice at board level that we just wouldn't have otherwise. Be visible and encourage others to be visible too. Call out discrimination, don't be silent. Host events throughout the year, not just Pride. Pride's important, but keep engagement going all year round. And finally, work with your inclusivity networks on their events. So support your inclusivity networks and be an ally to them. I hope you found that interesting. I think we have a Q&A at the end, so I'll be happy to answer any questions then. But now I'll hand over to Mary, who heads up our Ability Action Network. Thanks, Mary.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right. Can you hear me? I am actually talking to you from my bed. I feel it's very appropriate, but I've got a very complex break of the leg at the moment, and I've been laid up off my feet for the last 4 weeks. But it's kind of appropriate, isn't it, as I'm chairing of the Ability Action Group. I'm going to talk to you today very quickly about 4 key areas. Our disability awareness group, we've called the Ability Action Group at Tideway, to try and lend a positive tone to it. We're a team of about 10 individuals from across the company, some personal selection, some just people who wanted to get involved because they have a personal interest. We meet every quarter, generally, and I'll start by talking about some of the challenges we have. As you will be aware, unlike other Encompass, as we call them, groups, there's not an awful lot that's positive about disability. It's a very hard sell within an organisation, and there's nothing aspirational about it either. But we try and counter that by putting on events that are focused around highly successful, highly positive people from outside of the organisation mainly. So, for example, about a year ago, we had an all-afternoon event where we had invited somebody who was totally blind, but happened to be one of the leaders of the CITB, gentleman called John Dickinson Lilly. He came along with his guide dog. He was very inspirational. We also invited a head of Ralph Lauren, a lady who suffers from multiple sclerosis, and you'd never know it, but she gave us a very inspirational talk as well. The other person we had was somebody from HS2 who was profoundly deaf, and despite that, she was on the leadership team of HS2. She led a full and rich life, and was also very funny. So we want to present positive role models in this sphere, and we strive very hard to do that within the team. The other challenge that we do have, and this is possibly common in other areas of inclusivity, is that we have a problem with disclosure. Very few people like to disclose that they have a disability. Now, bear in mind, we consider disability to be self-certified. It's completely on the individual to decide whether they want to certify themselves as such. It's a personal choice. But it's important to an organisation, actually, that these people do, myself included, they do pronounce their disability. 1, so that we can assign good budget. 2, that we can make awareness of challenges and problems and diversity. And 3, so that we can make appropriate adjustments and appropriate policy and procedure across the organisation. If people are not disclosing, we don't have a true picture of the demographic, and that's a problem. So how have we addressed it? Well, 1, as I said, with positive role model-led events, but 2, we've had a campaign quite recently, just this year, which we've called Step Into My Shoes. And that campaign is about disclosure on an anonymous level. So we're asking people who do have a challenge with disability or anything else to tell their story very succinctly and anonymously, and to submit it to an anonymous mailbox. And then we'll have a person from the senior leadership team read out that story and that challenge, and hopefully a discussion will evolve from that. But I suppose because of that disclosure, that anonymous disclosure. So we're beginning to chip away at non-disclosure, but it's a hard sell, and I think everyone is probably aware of that. The other area that I want to talk about today is to, when you have a disability awareness group, is to get a partner from that space. We have a very solid partner in the Business Disability Forum, which is a charity organization which puts on awareness training. They help with policy and procedure, and they guide us through this very complex and ever-changing arena of disability. So we have an account manager who comes to our internal meetings and helps us along the way. We send her policy and procedure documents to check, make sure we're up to date and we're with the current legislation and the current zeitgeist as well, the current language. It's really important that we are absolutely at the forefront of that. So the Business Disability Forum help us with that. We do pay for the membership of this organisation, but I can say personally, it's well worth it. So if you're looking to form a disability group, then get a really good partner, and I can recommend BDF. They're great. The other area that I want to just quickly talk about, I've only got 5 minutes apparently, is that if you can, make some steps to lead the sector. So at Tideway, we've put on cross-industry events at our head offices so that we can lead, if we can, the discourse about employing people with disabilities across the construction industry. And it has actually evolved over the last 3 years that I've been involved. Our disability construction breakfasts or lunches have expanded, and we've started inviting people from Shell or Kodak in the past, or Balfour Beatty, some big organisations who've got involved. We sit around a table, we have a sandwich lunch, and we discuss best practice, poor results, examples of people doing extraordinary things when they've got a disability. We make films together, which we share amongst ourselves, and it's proved to be a really inspiring platform or forum. So I'd encourage people to do that if they want to go forward in this arena. I think that's all I've got at the moment, but I'm really happy to discuss or take any questions if anybody would like to further that. Okay, thank you. Now we're on to Arlette, I think.
Hi, I'm Arlette Cole. I am chair of the gender group. In my usual day job is I'm one of the construction engineer supervisors on Tideway East. So I think I won't go into it too much because it's already been mentioned, but our sponsor is Andy Older. He's been fundamental with what we've been able to do, progress, and really champion what we want to achieve as a group. Next slide, please. So to set the scene, Andy Mitchell in 2014 stated, "I want to achieve gender parity by the time we finish construction of London Super Sewer in 2023. A really big ask, considering that a lot of our industry, we're sort of talking in the range of sort of 5 to 18% of women on construction and engineering projects. Next slide, please. So As the gender group, as part of Encompass, we do have a budget, and some of the money we spend on individuals to attend technical conferences, quite often with a gender discussion in it, but not necessarily. So we've helped fund people to attend the Global Engineering Congress when it was in London, WISE conferences, and Women in Construction World Series last October. Next slide, please. We have arranged and participated in workshops and networking throughout the last 3 years that I've been doing it, and before me it was Kelly Bradley that was taking on the chair role. We've done gender parity hackathons where we had a group of about 40 people really honing into what we need to do. We've utilised matrices to find the gaps, and we've utilised special days in our calendar such as International Women in Engineering Day, to have workshops to find out ways of how we can encourage men to be allies in this ambition of the 50-50 target. Next slide, please. So for this year, 2020, intersectionality has become more and more of a focus for us. The Encompass network, as you've heard, has developed over the duration of the project, and as we come towards MICA and system commissioning, naturally the makeup of the company changes and Encompass will change with that. It's very important that we are mobile. So, for example, back in April, we decided to take a step back as a gender group so that we could contribute our spare time to help where we could, the race equality group. As Adam mentioned prior, J.K. Rolling's essay really brought home members of the gender group actually what is the definition of gender, what does it mean to us and for other people, and that resulted in the collaboration with the LGBTQ network. And this year we've wanted to incorporate discussions on how we enable the workplace, and so we're going to have a panel discussing that for International Women's Day. Next panel, please. So other gender parity initiatives have been done by Tideway, the company, rather than the gender parity group, although we've fed into a number of these. Like I say, the list is rather exhausted, but one thing I'd like to focus on is the annual engagement with staff. So we've been utilising Lean In Circles, Your Best Year Yet, and drive sessions for staff to be able to have time with senior management to get the opportunities they need to progress their career. So for example, at the drive session that I was at, there was an engineer who was working towards her ICE chartership and needed 6 months design experience. Andy Older was one of the senior leadership team in that meeting, and he said, I'll make it work. And in less than a month, she was at Tottenham Court Road getting that experience. External assessment, again, like Mary said, is very, very important, and we've utilised things like the WISE 10 steps, and we also were successful a couple of years ago with the Times Top 50 Employers for Women. Something that is, again, fundamental, and there's a whole load of activities and events that the main works contractors have done, including STEM virtual forums to actually work out why women aren't even considering our industry in the first place, find those gaps, actually talk to year 9 students, year 8 students before they're making their choices. Next slide, please. The next slide, please. So one of the things in the list that I'd like to really expand upon was the returners program. So about 6 years ago, there was our first cohort included Ines and Rachel. They are our group treasurer, so Ines is on the left and Rachel is with her 3 sons on the right. This program enabled people who had had a prolonged career break re-enter the industry, utilising the skills that they had gained over that period of time to really progress into senior roles. And the fact that they're here and some of the people that were in the second cohort as well are still with Tideway really shows that that programme can make a fundamental difference and really the industry for women can quite often be like a sort of Swiss cheese, lots of holes. We've got quite a few women joining, and then you've got that dropout, and it just allows people to re-enter the Swiss cheese and actually continue their career. Next slide, please. So we also want to demonstrate that we don't shy away from the very difficult conversations, for example, sexual harassment and domestic abuse. This affects too many people. Shouldn't affect anybody. So one of the things of the Tideway fundraising event in August and September was that the gender group took part in the Tunnel Challenge team to support Women's Aid and Drive Forward Foundation. And this was by walking and running, cycling as many lengths of the Tideway tunnel as possible. And doing these sorts of things, having news articles in our internal communications just really highlights to everybody that you have got someone to talk to. You know, we have mental health first aiders, and they are very highly publicised on sites in the start of shift briefings, that you have got someone to talk to. Next slide, please. But the biggest thing that the Gender Parity Group do each year, and what we probably spend the most time organising, is for International Women's Day. Last year, the hashtag was Each for Equal, and that inspired the topics that we did for our panels. So, for example, we had the top black hats for East, West and Central discuss their views on women entering the workplace. It was a very dynamic conversation, and we were very privileged also to have Emma Kent, Director of the Construction at the Met Police, who gave a keynote, really inspiring keynote message. Next slide, please. And finally, International Women's Day, we're not letting COVID hold us back. We're going digital, doing loads of things. Awards really just to celebrate the accomplishment of women and men over the past years. And also understand the importance of sharing knowledge and experience by inviting other construction projects into the conversation. Thank you very much, and I'll pass you back to Hettel.
Sorry, hi. Just going to quickly talk about the Carers Network. If I can get the next slide, please. This is slightly different to the other groups, as it's more about making sure that employees who are also carers feel supported and valued within the workplace. So when we introduced this, we made sure that there was a carers policy, so they had a reference point in terms of what they could and couldn't do. We made sure that there was 5 days annual leave to just give people a bit more flexibility. We also have an executive sponsor as well for this network group. And one of the main things we did to try and make sure we made people as aware as possible was to put an article in our weekly comms, just to let them know that this group was starting, to gather interest, and then with the people who were there to agree frequency and length of meetings, and tell them about the policy and the other resources available. We're also signed up with Carers UK, which provides a lot of information for carers, but also for employers, and how they can better support the carers that are in their organisation. So as an example, since the carers has been introduced in July 2019 to November 2020, 59 days of carers leave has been used. And in terms of how it works as an agenda, it's led by the carers themselves, so that they're able to get the information and resources and support that they need from it, and HR just facilitates. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, next slide. The Race Equality Group is the final group in the network. This was started in 2019. It was originally called the Cultural Inclusivity Group. When the group was created, we did sign up to the BITC Race Charter. This provides kind of 5 organisational objectives and as well as guidance on how to update policies and procedures to be anti-racist. We also organised a roundtable session to raise awareness of the group. And we had an executive sponsor who is Matthew Duncan. He's the CFO at Tideway. But despite all these things that we'd put in place, we just didn't have that much engagement from employees within the organisation. And when we did start it, we knew one of the key things to kind of help the main objectives was to get people comfortable in terms of talking about race. So we decided to organise a series of race conversations, with the first speaker being Afua Hirsch. But then, unfortunately, COVID took hold, and with everyone stuck at home and nothing to distract them, George Floyd's murder shocked the world and raised awareness of Black lives and the BLM movement. And it was this unique set of circumstances that created a situation for Tideway to examine its values. At News with Views, not long after the protests had started, News with Views is like a monthly company get-together where you can find out how the project is progressing, as well as other things that are going on within the organisation. And they were being done virtually, so this provided an opportunity for people to ask questions and make comments and that kind of thing. And in response to a question that was asked about Tideway's response to Black Lives Matter movement and Blackout Tuesday, someone anonymously posted "All Lives Matter." This then caused quite a big debate and discussion, and many at Tideway expressed sadness at the fact that the comment had been made, because it goes against the values at Tideway and the inclusive culture that had been created. But never want to miss an opportunity of what happened. The engagement within the race equality group increased a lot. So we went from having 4 people come to the meetings to having over 50. And there was a desire and engagement from the organisation to do something. One of the things was to change the name from cultural inclusivity to the race equality, so it made the purpose and intent of the group more clear. But there was also a demand from people to have mandatory training brought in. But we'd done a lot of the obvious training before COVID happened, so things like conscious inclusion, and we didn't want to just roll out something for the sake of it, so that, you know, to make people feel better and, oh, okay, action's been taken. We thought, let's use the opportunity to engage people in conversation. So we pushed ahead with the race conversation events. We've had Afua Hirsch speak, David Olusoga, Anna Carla. We also created 3 mandatory discussion guides for the teams to complete themselves. And the purpose of these was to just help people have a starting place in terms of where to start to have these conversations. And the topics we picked were microaggressions, privilege, and allyship. But we are also, as an organisation, working on the objectives through the race charter. And to build on this and to kind of maintain the engagement from the organisation, because that's a really important thing for any of this to work, is we're creating more discussion guides. We're also working on putting together a language dictionary. So this is all of the groups, a combined one, and we're looking at doing more events as well. Next slide, please. And finally, just a few key takeaways. The most important, I think, is be genuine in whatever initiatives and events you are planning, because I think if it comes across as a token gesture or something that the organisation doesn't believe in, then it won't work, because people will be able to see through that. Make sure you have an executive sponsor to help promote what you are doing at board level, and that will then emphasize that this is an important thing, even if you don't get an immediate return or able to quantify it in an easy way. And also, it's important to remember that this is a continuous thing. I don't want to use the word journey. So one-off events won't have the long-term impact or changes that you are going to be looking for. And lastly, just work with the other groups within your organisation as well, because there's a lot of knowledge there, so use it if you can. And that's it. That's Tideway's Diversity Inclusion Programme in Compass. Thank you for having us. Sorry we've run over a bit.
Okay, thanks very much to the 4 of you. And don't worry that we've run over. Really interesting and topic that needs to be discussed. We've got a few questions, and I think I'll let you decide who answers, although actually you all may want to say something on them. One that's come up quite a few times is about small businesses. and how they go about. I've sort of condensed it into a single question, really. So the question is, and there's 4 parts to it. As a small business, how do we go about collecting data, setting policy, building in diversity inclusion, and then enhancing the diversity and inclusion program that we have? So that's quite a big one. Who wants to go first on that?
I'll go, I guess. That's an interesting one. There are organisations that you can work with if you're not sure where to start, and especially as you are small, because what we're finding at Tideway is that even though we're kind of a medium-sized company, I think it's fair to say at the moment we are going to get smaller over time because we are a project. So, and we exist to build the sewer, and then once that's kind of over, then Tideway won't exist. So we're actually looking at how we can keep what we have in the culture, because it's really important. So we've taken the approach of going from an intersectionality viewpoint. In terms of where to start, I think it's just knowing. Yeah, it's a really difficult one because there's lots of different ways you could do it. Data, go back to a comms plan. If you say you want the data, this is why you want it, what you're going to do with it, like I said before. Sorry, were you going to say something, Mary? You're on mute. No, can't hear you. Oh, tech issues.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to support what Hetal was saying, is that it really, in a way, it starts with disclosure. If you're a smaller organisation, knowing your demographic and the needs and the wants and the aspirations of that employee base is really important. So to follow up your activities with what's important to your demographic within the organisation, and it sounds brutal in a way, but for small organisations, you probably have to come to a stage where you say, well, that section is not so important to us because we don't have that within our employee demographic. And so we've got to make a decision in where to invest time, funds, and energy. So if you can encourage people to disclose what's important to them, what they need, what they want within the organisation, I think that will guide you to a certain extent and will eliminate some activities if they need to be eliminated.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, gender and from like a LGBT perspective, there are sort of network groups, external network groups you could partner with or work with, or go to their events. They often have events, and some specific to our industry would be like inter-engineering or building equality, or I think there's one called Planning Out for town planners, LGBT in construction. There's different external network groups for a whole host of different sectors, and I think that would be a good place to start if you're a small business, because you can come together with other people from other companies and learn from them.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a two-way process as well, because you've got the groups and they'll have the things that they want to push, but also you need to get the buy-in from the executive level as well. So it's that thing of what are they looking for and what do they actually want to do, and are they genuine in their intent? Because if they're not, it's going to come through and it's not going to work. So it's lots of different things that need to kind of work together, and there needs to be, again, going back to, you know, a good communication plan. And there's lots of external agencies like Arlette and Adam have said that that you can work with, that will give you a steer in terms of where to go. So we work with Stonewall, Wise, BDF, business in the community. They've all helped give us a structure in terms of how to proceed. And they all give guidance in terms of policies and procedures and that kind of thing as well. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, yes, thanks very much. Yeah, I think it does. I think, you know, so any small business that's listening at the moment, make use of external support that's available to you. Yeah, okay, guys, we really are. We're over time, so we're going to have to end it there. But thank you so much for joining, and congratulations on having the first tech issue of the day. I mean, if any session was going to have a tech issue, it was the one with 4 speakers. But I'm sure it's just the first of many. But yeah, largely it was absolutely excellent. So thank you very much, guys.